Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for Digital Transformation here at Cognizant, and I want to thank you for joining us today. This is another one of our segments in the series Mobile Expert Interviews. Today I'm just thrilled to have a longtime friend of mine, Dan Homrich, who's the EVP of Product Management at StarMobile, join us today. So Dan, thanks for joining.
Hey Kevin, it's great to see you again, and I'm always happy to be chatting with you.
Awesome. So I'm here in Boise, Idaho, kind of sunny at the moment, but it's been raining all morning. It's really the first of our winter rain, and it looks like it's here to stay. How's things in Atlanta, Dan?
We're here in Tech Square right next to Georgia Tech, and it is an incredible environment we have. The weather itself couldn't be better. It was 40 degrees this morning. It was up to about 74 today. So for those of us who enjoy a change of pace without ice and snow, it's perfect.
Well, very good. So Dan, you and I have known each other and kind of grown up together here in enterprise mobility, haven't we?
We have. We've seen a lot of changes, haven't we?
We certainly have. And, you know, this is, as I announced earlier, this is part of our Mobile Expert Interview series. So I think probably the first question we should start out with today is, Dan, what makes you a mobile expert?
Well, I've been interviewed a few times by you. I think that's one qualification. I think the other is, with the exception of our CEO, I've probably been involved in mobile than just about longer than anybody else I know. My first introduction to mobility was back in the early 80s in Tupelo, Mississippi, and worked for a real visionary leader, and been involved with it ever since. And I've been involved in a lot of industries, so watch it mature over the years, and here we are today having conversations about how we mobilize the enterprise, and we're still working on that issue and addressing that problem. And I think we've got something here at StarMobile that's going to help.
Well, that's awesome. So let's just go back 5 years, Dan, and just talk about over the last 5 years, how have you seen the enterprise mobility market evolve and develop to where it is today? Why don't you walk us through that?
Yeah, when you and I first started talking, and we were both trying to figure out this enterprise mobile space 5 years ago, it was the advent of the iPhone and some other technology that made it enticing.
Now, wait, Dan, I need to correct you and just say I already knew it.
Well, yes, yeah. I think I read one of your articles, and I learned all about it, right? So I'd started a company called SmartSoft Mobile, and the intent there was to mobilize the enterprise. It was the advent of being able to leverage consumer-grade technology into the enterprise. I saw the potential behind it, as did others, and so started a company with that focus. And we got derailed pretty quickly because the B2B market, candidly, while ready to experiment, wasn't ready for the level of investment and trust required to really get mobile. So we started working with companies like the Home Depot, Haverty's, McKesson, Honda Manufacturing, and others in helping them solve some more of their B2C issues, as well as investigate B2B. And we also started working with a company called SAP at the time and helping them address their B2B business needs and mobile needs. So we advanced through that, grew the business, and really we saw during that entire time the emphasis being on more brand awareness, right? That more what we'd call the classic business to consumer presence. That approach, making sure the brand was well represented in the mobile ecosystem. A couple of years ago, my company got acquired by a great company named Mobiquity, a Boston-based venture-backed firm, really focusing on services opportunities, and we continue to see the B2C market expand there as well. Over the past couple of years, in addition to being introduced to some technology here at StarMobile, which I'll talk about in a moment, we began to see the shift in the interest from the enterprise begin to come back to embracing mobile for B2B. But it's been a maturation process, getting the B2C elements in place, becoming comfortable with that, clearing some of the hurdles, the MDMs, the MEMs, that sort of technology, getting a comfort level with the ability for the organization to adopt it, and now I believe that organizations are really ready to embrace mobile in ways and magnitude they have not before.
So Dan, tell me if you've seen the same thing. It seemed like, if we go back 4 or 5 years ago, there was a great deal of investment and energy put into mobile application development platforms. Everybody said, let's build this out and they will come. But it seems like the they will come part was quite slow because people were still just putting their toe in the water. Enterprises were not convinced this was the way to go. They were looking at kind of competing theories on the direction in which enterprise mobility would go. So there wasn't a lot of mass deployments at that point, and a lot of vendors kind of struggled during that point. But it seems to me now that enterprises are more comfortable that they have a good vision of where the market's going. Do you see that same thing, or do you have a different perspective?
It's my perspective is very similar. I think that, Kevin, early on, anytime there's a rollout of a new technology on the scale of something as disruptive as mobile, large organizations are typically hesitant to run down any particular path beyond the most immediate need of monetization, right? So if it's brand awareness, if it's B2C, much like enterprises did when the web first came out, those who were in retail got a retail presence on the web, regardless of how relatively ineffective it may have been, right? They made their presence known. And we saw retail organizations do the same thing with mobile. And now we're looking at enterprises who have been hesitant, waiting to see the maturation of the technologies and the capabilities, maybe some consolidation in the space, and more clarity about the right solutions for specific needs. They've been waiting for that to occur, and I believe that has occurred now.
Got it. So let's actually zoom in on that notion then, Dan. What have companies learned, and what do you think the clarity is today?
Well, so I think rule number one is that one size doesn't fit all. There's not going to be, for most organizations, there's not going to be a silver bullet that addresses all of their mobile needs. There's a lot of different systems on the back end that may need mobilization capability, and not every tool is going to be well suited to solve every problem. There is a place for native development. There are places for extensions to existing back office or enterprise systems provided by the vendors. There are also solutions and needs met by products like ours as well.
Got it. So, so if we look back 4 years ago, mobile application development platform and standardizing on a platform where you could reduce the total cost of ownership, that was kind of the going strategy at the time. Yet it seems to me that companies are turning away from that traditional mobile application development platform and looking at kind of new cloud-based alternatives. What's your thoughts there? Are you seeing similar or different?
Yeah, seeing something very similar there. The years that I spent at Mobiquity doing nothing but professional services to some of the world's, certainly the United States' best leadership companies, really demonstrated the willingness for an organization to invest in that presence in the market. They can't afford to repeat that scale and that effort over and over again, right? You can't take that same level of effort that you may apply to your business-to-consumer solution or a critical business application and repeat that 100 or 200 or 500 times in the enterprise. There has to be a more cost-effective, more a speedier approach to addressing that issue. So yes, cloud-based solutions that are able to offer a unique capability in that space are becoming more and more attractive.
Got it. So talk to me about how you guys are kind of processing all these evolutions and all these changes to the market, and what are you guys at StarMobile doing to position yourself where the market's going to be?
Well, so Kevin, let me ask you, what do you think the average spend of a Global 2000 enterprise would have invested in their enterprise solutions, their existing enterprise infrastructure? What do you?
Oh man, it must. If we're talking about Fortune 500s, it's probably hundreds of millions.
Yeah, it likely is hundreds of millions. And when we think about having to go back out and ask someone to recreate that investment just to get it mobile, that just doesn't make any sense, right? So our approach is first and foremost about leveraging technology to extend that investment organizations have already made into the ability to mobilize that existing content. That's the workflows, the rules, all of the processes that go in place, including those existing back office systems, and do it with minimal disruption, minimal footprint, make it cloud and SaaS based, and make it infinitely scalable for them as well.
So you're not, if I understand it right, Dan, you're not necessarily proposing starting from scratch and trying to mobilize everything new. You're saying, what do they have? What business rules are already in place? What databases are there? What processes are already being used? And how do we mobilize those?
Yeah, so someday we can do another interview and we'll talk about what our roadmap is and what we believe the direction is, but specifically right now today, talking about leveraging those assets. So our approach is very much looking into an enterprise, examining what they have in terms of existing web-based assets, and that could be an ERP system, it could be a homegrown solution, it could be a SharePoint system, it could be a myriad number of solutions. It could be used by thousands of users, or it could be used by several hundred inside an enterprise. And what we do is we apply our technology that takes that, connects to that, and then provides connectivity, and it results in a native mobile app experience for the end user. We're allowed to generally create new workflows out of existing systems that is not net new technology, meaning that we're not changing logins or processes or things of that nature, but allows us to create a more efficient workflow or experience for the mobile user. And that's really what sets us apart. In addition to our scalability and the ease of consumption, it's optimizing that experience for the mobile user without doing development work. That's the critical elements.
Got it. And contrast that to what some of the other guys do for me, Dan. Just so if somebody doesn't have experience in this space, how is that a different approach from perhaps some other vendors out there?
Well, so having come out of a number of years of doing professional services at SmartSoft Mobile, as well as other locations, it was always the intent to go in and monetize the hours that we were spent building new transactions, connections, right, to existing back office systems, and that meant that we'd often have to use some sort of connectivity. We may have to write new interfaces, web APIs, BAPIs would be a familiar term, things of that nature. And what we do is we sit on top of all of that technology to leverage everything that's already in place, and we really obfuscate the complexity of mobilizing at a level of the user, right? We abstract that capability and make that transparent, the access to all of that information on the back end transparent. So in the simplest cases, and we've done very successfully implementations of mobilizing applications for customers in the 5-day time frame. And I know that that's something that I even hesitate to say, and I'll be happy to be called out on it. I won't go less than 5 days, others might, but we have the capability of doing that because of our technology, and that's because we're not having to connect at a level that is adds greater complexity to building out the solution. So making sure that we're operating and interfacing basically like a user interfaces with a system provides us the speed to market, the simple implementation, the security, and all the other elements that are important to organizations.
Got it. So if we compare that to a typical native development project that might be in an enterprise, so they're going to look at requirements from the business, they're going to look at existing systems, etc. They're going to put together a plan and a project and start coding. So that's kind of a typical scenario. And how would you contrast that scenario with how you would approach something like that?
Yeah, so I had mapped out a very comprehensive multi-phase process, presented it to a prospect, and he said, oh, basically what you do is you understand, you design and deliver, and you implement. And so the customer put it in terms that they understood and said, yes, that is actually exactly what we do. So our approach is to go in and examine with the customer or the prospect a number of workflows that typically aren't going to be necessarily high on the list to mobilize because they may not be perceived to get the greatest amount of traction in a particular market, right? For example, are they building the brand or extending it? Yet they impact, the absence of those applications impact users inside the ecosystem on a day in, day out basis, right? So we'll go in, understand, look at a few of those workflows, and then we'll sit down with our user experience people and our technologists as well as a customer product advocate, and we'll map out in a 2-hour session what a optimized mobile workflow would look like. We are then given access to the systems, and we come back and using our technology, our StarMobile Studio, we actually produce a native application that then they can distribute. And that whole cycle typically takes about 2 weeks end to end once we get access to the right people and we get it scheduled inside our system. But that's the difference. So we're going in, when I say with a light footprint, it doesn't mean it's not high impact. It simply means that we're not asking for new systems and new databases and all those other elements to be built. We're leveraging everything that's already in place.
Very good. So talk to me about the ROI. What does that approach to mobile app development and mobilizing solutions, how does that process change expected ROIs?
Oh, that's a great question, and there's a lot of different avenues that we can go down that path. We recently had a prospect come to us who is receiving fines on an annual basis of $1.5 million because one class of their employees is not submitting information in a timely and regular basis, and so they get fined when the employees don't, when their certifications are not up to date. So the process of mobilizing with our solution is substantially less than $1.5 million. We put together the proof of technology with them in about 2 weeks. So you can think of some factor less than $1.5 million, let's say in the neighborhood of 10% of that number, and understand the value that we return in a case like that. The second element is when you look at the long list of mobile or applications in enterprise that need to be mobilized, and there's a lot that won't make it to the top of the list because there's always competing priorities. Leveraging our technology allows an enterprise to mobilize not only those critical applications that do need to be mobilized immediately, but also allows us in the enterprise and our partners to address that long list of solutions that otherwise wouldn't be attainable. And that's a key differentiator. We are out to optimize and mobilize every workflow that can be mobilized in the enterprise.
Got it. So let me throw out a hard one here for you, Dan. I just completed a research project this morning called Real-Time Mobile Infrastructure, and the results of this survey really expose the fact that a lot of legacy IT environments are not really conducive to having a real-time operation or supporting real-time mobile data. So there's some work that has to be done in the infrastructure. Are you seeing that as well? And when you run into that, how do you address it?
Well, that's and I know you didn't tee this up, but that's a wonderful question because that really represents our sweetest spot. We can pick any solution. Let's talk about an SAP ERP system, for example, where there's a tremendous amount of money that has been invested in a workflow, right? Security rules, internationalization or localization, all of those elements. And if I want to take on the effort of mobilizing a component of that, there are a variety of ways that I can do that. But if I want to mobilize, for example, a purchase requisition approval in SAP or any other back office ERP system, I could operate it at the data access layer. I could try it at a API or a web API or equivalent of a BAPI. I could attempt to do all of those things, but those are very disruptive, very, very costly, very time-consuming. So what we do is we actually come in and we approach the application from a browser perspective, if you will, and interact with it at that level. That allows us as a cloud, StarMobile as a hosting provider and SaaS provider to be able to handle all of that infrastructure that's necessary for the organization to go mobile. Meaning that if those users were in their office, right, accessing those systems, we are basically replicating that in our cloud environment. We're doing it safely, securely, and we can scale using Amazon Web Services or other web services to grow it significantly. And all of the burden of managing that is taken off the enterprise, and we manage that for them. And remember, when we go through this process, we have done no change whatsoever to the back office solutions. So if someone says, does that mean that you can mobilize my existing legacy system going all the way back to green screen and the existing infrastructure that I have in my ecosystem? The answer is yes, we can.
Wow. Well, that's impressive, because the total cost of ownership of supporting mobility is also one of those really hot buttons right now. I think, from my observation, Dan, a lot of companies attempted proof of concepts and pilots, and looked at the expense and the effort that went into those pilots, and then took it, swallowed hard, and said, look, if that's an example of what we need to do with the next 100 apps, that cost is going to be prohibitive to our IT budget. So they're looking for these alternative ways. Are you seeing the same thing when it comes to total cost of ownership? Is that playing a more important role in discussions now than it did?
Yeah, it absolutely is, Kevin. I think that for someone to say mobile isn't going to work means they haven't found the right way to solve their problem, right? And I've long been an advocate of using multiple tools to solve this mobile problem. And I think now that there are some experiences, everyone has some level of experience with mobilization, right? Some is better than the others. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people figure out how not to do things, right? Because it was too expensive, it was too time intensive. The other side of the equation is that solving it from a pure technology perspective, as you know, is almost a death knell to the mobile effort, right? If you take a purely technology approach and you don't take the user into account in the process, then you're almost doomed for failure from the start. And that's one of the things that we actually bring together when we create an application. It's actually using our experienced design team, our user experience, user design, user interface people to make sure that the app is like any other app available in the store, and that's part of the expertise that we bring to the table. So the ROI question certainly is a valid question. There's no doubt about it, and total cost of ownership is certainly has to be considered. What we're seeing is our buyers are getting much more savvy about picking the right tool to help them in the right instance, right? And we are one of those. We are one of those tools in that toolbox to help make sure that they have everything they need in their mobile space.
Got it. Well, Dan, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge and insight with all of us.
It was my pleasure, Kevin. I really enjoyed this, always do, and want to connect again here in a few months and talk about what some of the things are on our roadmap based upon our experience and our success so far.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone out there that's watching for joining us today as well. Thank you.